Welcome to Classroom 2 Courtroom. Here's your host, Scott Benton.
Hey everyone, Scott Benton here. I am the host of Classroom 2 Courtroom Podcast. How are you? We are a podcast dedicated to showing law school students how to transition out of the world of the theoretical into the practical as you become a full-time, bona fide, and fully licensed attorney and you begin your career. As you know, they don't teach you how to practice as an attorney in law school, nor should they. They're busy teaching you how to graduate law school, and this podcast will take care of the rest. That way, when you show up for your first job as an attorney, you will know how to actually practice as attorney if you listen to episodes that we're putting out of Classroom 2 Courtroom Podcast. Today, we are going to take a look at whether or not you should work towards saving your client money. Should you save your client money? Now, this is a subject that comes up sometimes, especially with newer attorneys when they get into their first position as an attorney and they start to see the cost of legal services. It's natural to try and figure out how to reduce those costs the way that you might want to try and figure out how to reduce costs of, say, if you take your car in for a car repair, you don't want to pay thousands of dollars, of course, when you can pay a few $100s. And a lot of times when it comes to legal services, which can be costly over time, newer attorneys will frequently think about how to save money for their clients. And so we are going to look at whether or not you should be focused on saving money for your clients. A lot of times that means taking shortcuts. If you are, for instance, you need to write a status report, you might skip the status report. Or if there are expert witnesses, maybe you don't hire an expert witness, that type of thing. And these are certainly going to help save money for your client, but it might also have some other deleterious effects on your case. And so the question becomes, do you want to focus on saving your client money? Now, I'm going to suggest that focusing on saving money for your clients is not where your mind should be. Your mind should actually be focused on the value of the case. The value of the case is where you want to focus and not on saving your client money. Let's say, for instance, you have a probate case. Now, the firm that I work for is a trust and probate litigation and administration firm. And so that's what I'm seeing all day long. But let's say that you have an estate that's worth $1 million and you have a client who has a 50% stake in that estate. That means that all in, they're probably going to get about $500,000, all things being equal. So your mind should really be focused on getting them that $500,000 or as much as you possibly can from the estate and focusing on the value that your client will receive and not trying to save a few $100s here and a few $100s there. Now, your responsibility as their attorney, as their representative that they have hired is simply to understand their case, understand their legal objectives, do some research to figure out what strategies are needed to reach their legal objectives. Write up those strategies, write up the pros and cons of each of those strategies, and present those to your client. That's your job. Whether or not you're saving money for the client is immaterial for the process that you're engaged in as their representative. And I'll tell you why in just a moment. So you have given your client the different strategies that you've researched and that you have figured out will help them achieve their goals. And each of those strategies, let's say there's 3 of them, are going to have cons and they're going to have pros. And you've discussed those cons and those pros with your client, and that's it. Now you're hands off at that point, and you're going to let them decide. You're going to let them decide the direction that the case is going to go. And that way, when you go home at night, you're really not carrying any of that burden for those decisions on your shoulders. You've done the very best you can as their representative, as their attorney, in order to point out the different directions that they can go. And by the way, one of those directions is simply to not engage your legal services any further if it's not going to serve them, or if it's going to be too costly for them, or if it's going to be too difficult, or if they have statistically a low chance of prevailing. The client may feel that it's not worth pursuing, but you're going to give them all of the information that you possibly can so that they are informed. They have all of the information that they need in order to make the best possible decision based on the direction that they want to go. So in terms of saving money for your clients, that's not really a part of that thought process at all. In fact, it would really be up to the client to decide if they wanted to save money on their own case. So for instance, maybe there were 15 witnesses to an event and they don't want to pay for 15 declarations. They only want to pay for 3 declarations because getting 15 declarations is just going to be very costly for them. So they may want to save money and only get 3 declarations, but you, as their attorney, are going to point out the benefits and the liabilities of only getting, say, 2 or 3 declarations. Now, maybe they don't want to hire an expert witness because they're concerned about the cost of hiring an expert witness. And in that case, you're going to point out the pros and the cons of not hiring an expert witness, and they get to decide, is it worth it? If their part of the estate is going to yield them $500,000, then, and the difference is maybe a few $100s, then maybe it's not going to matter in their mind. But maybe they just don't have savings to go to, so they have to go to family or friends in order to pay for the legal services, or they have to make other arrangements that are outside of the scope of what you're doing as an attorney. But that's not really part of your process. The part of your process is simply giving them their options, then letting them decide. But your process is not involved in figuring out how to shortcut the work that you're doing on this case and how to save the money. For instance, if you have to write up a status report, you're not going to make a decision as to whether or not you're going to save the money by, for instance, not writing up the status report. You're still going to write up the status report, which is a billable event, and you're going to move forward with the case properly. Writing up the status report is going to help your client to stay on track, to understand where the case is. They're going to keep paying for legal services because they're going to have much more clarity about where you stand in that overall process. And then it also protects you and the law firm by supplying those types of communications to your clients, which are an expected part of the work that you do on any sort of case where you periodically provide a status report update. So you don't want to shortcut a status report update. You don't really want to have your mind anywhere near the idea of saving money for your clients. You simply want to focus on the value of that case and work towards delivering the maximum amount that you can based on that value number. And that's where your mind should be, and that's where your time is better spent. So I hope this has been helpful in terms of figuring out whether or not you need to work towards saving your client money. Remember that you are there as an advisor. You're providing options after understanding what their legal objectives are, and you're letting the client make that ultimate decision. That takes a lot of the stress off of you. You can enjoy your evening and weekends a lot more, and that's when practicing law starts to become fun. And what this podcast is here to point out to you, that you don't want to get yourself in any sort of traps that are just going to create unnecessary stress for you. You want to make sure that you are moving along as efficiently as you possibly can, and that you are enjoying the process. I'm Scott Benton. I'm the host of the Classroom to Courtroom Podcast. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Thank you so much for joining me on it. And if this is material that you are enjoying and you'd like to receive an alert every time we put out a new episode, you can go over to our website. Our website is classroom2courtroom.com. That's classroom, the number 2, courtroom.com. You can put in your contact information and you'll receive an alert whenever we put out a new episode. And if you do like this material, don't forget to share and subscribe. We hope you'll join us on the next episode of the Classroom to Courtroom Podcast. And until then, we hope you'll also join us in making the world a better place, one client at a time. Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us on Classroom to Courtroom, the podcast designed to help launch your first-time legal career. If you have any feedback or ideas for episodes you'd like to hear, you can always find us at classroom2courtroom.com, where you can leave comments, ask questions, and even join our online community. And always remember, by becoming an excellent and confident practicing attorney, you actually make the world a better place. Now get out there and master the art of practicing law.